very much, Race. Thank you, IFPNA. Thank you, DevX, and all the organizers for having me here. Alpha, Beta, Atita. Many of the world's foremost malaria experts believe this is the last fortress standing in the global fight against malaria in the most endemic regions of the world. For 100 years, various quinine derivatives were fine. And people took these medicines, and in a few days were back to work. But over the last couple of decades, we've seen incredible levels of resistance to most of the medicines that used to work. Until at present, perhaps this is the last barrier to millions of deaths across the developing world. Along the Thai-Burmese border, for instance, 80% of malaria sufferers are resistant to almost any other malaria drug, apart from this one. Only problem is, this one is fake. Or, as you say in the United States, it's a knockoff. This is the right one. The only reason why we know it's fake, and we discovered it was fake last month, is because even though the counterfeiters were ruthless enough to try and replicate this little patch here, they were not smart enough. Because this is more intelligent than it looks. However, had it not been for that little patch, then this relentless rampage of resistance to antimalarials around the world will have continued unabated. And that resistance will have continued to spread everywhere malaria is endemic. Why? Because the guys who make the knockoffs, who make these medicines that look just like this, to the point where if you are in a pharmacy and you pick one of these up, you have absolutely no chance of detecting that they are indeed fake. They are smart enough to put into these packs small quantities of the active ingredient in order to evade standard test of efficacy. Now, what that means, therefore, is that the average patient is exposed to subclinical or subtherapeutic quantities of the active ingredient, and over a period of time, the pathogen develops an armor. Worse than that, it spreads from that person through vectors to other people until the profile and the pattern of the disease itself is completely transformed. You have a super disease. And now, it's a completely different diabolic, because it's no longer a counterfeit medicines problem. It's an entire health system problem. Why? Because in Ghana, the cost of treating malaria has risen from around $70 million when quinine and other antimalarials were effective to more than $700 million today. A 10-fold increase in the economic costs of that disease burden. What are we trying to do about this? Bottom up, right in Africa, local innovators. Somebody have already talked about health entrepreneurs at the local level. As I said, there is a patch on the medicine that allows every user, when they pick up that pack, to scratch off a small layer of that particular patch, reveal a unique ID that is unique to that pack, as you can see here, SMS it to a 911 type number, a hotline, and get a response based on the querying of multiple repositories. Now, this is very important. The response is based on which repositories are programmed to respond. And that could mean anything from good manufacturing practices through to originality checks, through to evaluations of other health metrics in that country. So it could be, for instance, a repository to do with adherence. Anything you can think of, but delivered at that instant, the person is most captive to information when they want to know, can I take this or not? So think of it this way. You are plotting the coordinates of each pack of medicine in the health supply chain as people take them. Think of it as a GPS for products. That every time somebody buys that product, they contribute information to a rapidly evolving repository which is dynamic. So think of it as an institution. We've used that word several times here. But better than institution, think of it as a meta-institution. And now here is the metaphor. When you think of a wedding and you think of the institution of marriage, they are clearly not the same thing. One is an event. So scratching it off and sending it is an event. What institution are we trying to create here? It's a meta-institution, a generative institution. Not all institutions are the same. Not all partnerships are the same. What this particular arrangement allows to happen is that different repositories can talk to each other. Regulators, health industry associations, researchers, IMS, etc. What could we be querying? Epidemiological patterns. Why is there so much flu here and not enough flu there? Why is there a seasonal variation in the prescription patterns in that part of the country, but not in the other part of the country? Why is that person who for the last decade has taken so much of these medicines still taking that medicine? We can go so granular, it's frightening. But the most fascinating thing about this is extremely cost-effective, to the point where every single ACT, anti-malaria in the world, can be tracked for less than $10 million. Every single anti-malarial in the world. What is the cost of developing a new effective drug? Some experts say $800 million. What will it take to track every single pack of medicine from an institutional point of view? And what do I mean by that? From a transparency point of view. 40% of medicines delivered into the South African public health chain is diverted. 40%. How many users of medicine around the world abuse those medicines? We have no clue. What will it take to track every single outcome of every single medicine consumed everywhere on the world? And what would that hyper-transparency do for the medical industry and for that woman and that child? Thank you.
So we have a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions. It's a very interesting and unique product that Bright has come up with, and I met him a few years ago and was fascinated what an impact it was having, because you say it's actually kind of almost tamper-proof.
Yes. The reason is that, unlike most technical interventions, what this does is not enter into an arms race with counterfeiters by saying, we're going to create an impregnable system. What it does is it enhances the transparency in the system by connecting so many data points over time. And that really means, therefore, that you have to fake a whole social ecosystem. So that hyper-transparency that is fostered by allowing us to know, okay, first of all, we're serializing all the medicines. That is standard. But more important than that, everybody is involved. So it's a hyper-patient-centered system where everybody is sending it. And over time, you cannot really evade the accountability that creates. Even if the system is penetrated, it will be known because of that hyper-transparency. And I think that is what is unique. And that's what I meant by there are institutions and there are institutions.
Again, if any hands are up, I'm trying to look against the lights a little bit, which is okay, but just make sure that you can put them up clearly so we can get a microphone to you. You have one there, please. Thank you.
Excuse me? Thank you.
Thank you. Hello there, I'm Angela Waneri. I'm with Janssen Pharmaceuticals. I just wonder how many products are registered. But first of all, I wanted to ask you if there have been instances of the fakers trying to copy this, because I can just imagine after a while, people get to believe that once it has those, if they scratch up and see a number, that means it's okay, and maybe not bother calling in. And I can also imagine that if counterfeiters would take advantage of that and print their numbers. I know there's been an earlier system where the counterfeiters will actually copy a number onto the package as well, just like the one you showed us. So if people, I'm thinking there's going to be an education component to this, so people know to actually call and not rely on the fact that there is a number and assume that if there's a number that it works.
So 2 questions in one. First question, now we have most of the big regional companies that produces medicines in West Africa using the system, except that because it's an ecosystemic approach, you do need to have regulators and other public health participants involved, which has meant Nigeria has seen the most use of the system, simply because the government is interested in participating. Ghana, Kenya, and other countries where this has been implemented, there's been much less progress, partly because once the government got involved, then rather than have it become a true partnership of multiple stakeholders, it began to look like a regulatory directive. And I think that has held back the pharmaceutical industry from being extremely center place in helping to evolve it as an institution, as opposed to as a technical intervention. Now, to answer your question, the second question about how do we stop patients from beginning to develop a sense of false confidence, the truth is you have to think of this beyond brand protection. And that is when I say it's not a technical intervention, it's a new pattern of behavior. It's a meta-institution. People must now begin to believe that it empowers them. So not only are they sending it to get information about the quality of the drug, or in this particular instance, whether the drug is an original pack, they can be querying many more repositories. One of those repositories could be simply the health services in the locality that you're in. So I pick up that pack from a pharmacy, and I send an SMS. The system queries it, determines that that particular location from which that SMS came is a place where hepatitis vaccines are now available for free. Why shouldn't the system tell you that? So why not create a system where you have people express confidence in the self-empowerment of patients, and therefore use it for more than brand protection? And that's why I also said, if you begin to do that and people are now constituents, so I go there and I check it because I want to find out what is the latest about health in my locality, for instance, then I'm extremely part and parcel of the process of defending the system, as opposed to a technical intervention like holograms, which is simply between the maker of the medicine and their contractor. This is actually a pact between the patient, the health system, and the manufacturer. And I think it's a completely different arrangement.
Right, a quick question. Oh, well, please, I'll let the lady get you a microphone. Give me 1 second. Thanks. Here you go. Tell us who you are as well.
Hi, my name is Leticia Villalon. I'm with the PAHO Foundation. Are you using the system also to test for patient adherence, for understanding of the instructions on the medication?
Mm-hmm. So this system is tied to a call center in Nigeria. In other countries, the call center integration is not complete. But in Nigeria, we've come full circle. So what that means is when you send the text message, the response back includes a connection to a local call center. But then the call center, because you have a prescription, the connection to that, it means there's context. So that means that when you call the call center on a toll-free line, they have some indication in terms of where the bounds of that information they should deliver to you are. So that means that you can use this not only for adherence, but also to monitor feedback regarding medicine use in the community. You can find out, for instance, how much is the medicine cost. Let me give you a very great example. The Global Fund spends billions of dollars trying to get medicines to those who don't have access to them. The problem is that some of these medicines are heavily subsidized. So they get into the health supply chain, somebody takes out the subsidized medicine, goes to the next country where it's not subsidized, and sells at full price. Sometimes, to cover their tracks, they replace it with fake medicines. We've seen that in the Ghanaian public health sector, where genuine medicines have been taken out and sent to Togo because Togo was not part of that program, and fake medicines have been replaced, have been substituted for. In a system where you can detect where somebody is authenticating a medicine from, that is not possible, because you can geographically bound the authentication. So that's an example. Secondly, you can find out how much the person bought the medicine for, in order to find out people who are profiteering from the system. If they had done that for AMFM, for instance, then the subsidies that were the billions of dollars that went into subsidizing malaria medicine will have had a real impact, as opposed to the situation now, where in parts of the private supply chain, highly subsidized medicines are being sold at full cost. So we have to think of it beyond the technical intervention and find out what kinds of institution can it generate. So the difference between stagnant institutions and generative institutions. I think this is a potentially generative institution. It can create new protocols of how you do things. And I think that is where the fascination really lies.
Right, just a quick final question. And how much uptake has there been of this system? How widely is it being used?
So in Nigeria, virtually every anti-malarial, every antibiotic is on it. In Ghana, I would say roughly 10%, so very minor. In East Africa, even less so. But in India, we're now seeing almost every of the top 100 companies in India, about 88 of them now uses the system in one dimension or the other. So the uptake is encouraging, but given the scope of the problem, it could be far more better.
Right, well, I wish you luck with this, and thank you very much for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you.